Spygate could be one of the biggest political scandals in history. That, according to President Trump, who today upped the ante in his battle with the Justice Department. Yes, it does not appear he plans to back down anytime soon. As you know, the president has been pushing the story that the FBI had a confidential informant inside his campaign spying on him for political purposes. He's calling them the criminal deep state. And today on the White House lawn, he put them all on notice. Watch.
Everybody wants this solved, but a lot of bad things have happened. We now call it Spygate. What I want is total transparency. Wait, you have to have transparency. Even they probably want transparency because this issue supersedes a party. This supersedes Republicans and Democrats. So what I want from Rod, from the FBI, from everybody, we want transparency.
Baby, I love transparency. I am Mrs. Cling-Wrap. Tomorrow, House Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes and House Oversight and Government Reform Chair Trey Gowdy are meeting with the head of the FBI for a briefing on the informant. The White House set up the meeting and did not invite any Democrats. That has obviously upset Chuck and Nancy, as well as a few Republicans who claim the meeting will lose all legitimacy. And they don't like a proposal to have bipartisan congressional leadership get the same briefing next week. So is the president right to be railing against the deep state? And should tomorrow's meeting include Democrats? Joining me now, Florida Republican Congressman Ron DeSantis. He's also running for governor in the Sunshine State. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Kennedy. How are you?
Very well. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful.
All right. So let's talk about this a little bit, because there are a lot of elements to the story that may or may not be true. And I think it's irresponsible to operate that we know there was a politically motivated spy operating within the Trump presidential campaign. What do we know for certain? And what about that is most troubling to you?
I think what we know is whatever this informant did, and he obviously did something, and we're going to get the facts on that. If there was reason to believe that there was some type of problem with Russia influence in Trump's campaign, what should the FBI, CIA, or any of these agencies have done? They should have gone and briefed the campaign and say, hey, we're worried about Carter Page, or we're worried about Papadopoulos, or we're worried about this. But they never did that, Kennedy, and that's the thing. If you were really just, as Clapper said, yeah, we were spying, but we were spying on the Russians, then you should have gone to the campaign so that they could have taken defensive measures. The fact that they didn't leads me to believe that they were actually interested in hoping that there was something wrong with the campaign so that they can use that. So if they can explain
if
why
they were hoping
those...
that there was something wrong with the campaign, then, you know, not to be a conspiracy theorist, but to revisit some of the Strzok and Page text, that might be the insurance policy, because it's really, I agree with you, it's really difficult to explain. If you are an agnostic supporter of the rule of law and the Constitution, meaning you're not swayed either side politically, and you want to make sure that our elections are sacred and they are not infiltrated by Russians or any other nefarious actors, wouldn't you make certain that if there were vulnerable people within a campaign who had been contacted by people who were very interested in sowing chaos and discord in this country, wouldn't you make sure someone knew about that? So
Precisely.
They could either take those people off the campaign or make sure that there was extra security, cyber and otherwise measures put in place to protect the campaign and the candidate?
Of course you would. And yet Loretta Lynch, Comey, they all decided, this was very early on, actually, much earlier than late July when the supposed Papadopoulos thing started, Crossfire Hurricane. This was in the spring, I think probably early spring of 2016, before Trump was even officially the nominee. So they chose to keep them in the dark. And then if you look at what this informant is alleged to have done, I mean, he was clearly trying to manufacture contacts by bringing Papadopoulos over to London, manufacturing contacts with Carter Page. So there's just a lot of stuff here that's very, very fishy. And that's why I agree with the president. Full transparency, put the information out there, and then let the American people decide. But I don't want our tax dollars going to paying for somebody to basically keep tabs on an opposition party's campaign when there was no evidence of any wrongdoing.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the meeting, because things are at such a fever pitch and so politicized. Is it wise to have two separate briefings? Why not have congressional Democrats in the meeting in the first place? I mean, talk about redundancy and wasting time.
Yeah, I'm fine. I mean, I want the American people, Republican and Democrat, to be able to know what happened. So I have no objection at all to including some of the Democrats.
Adam Schiff isn't going to be any less of a blowhard if he's briefed later. He's going to do the exact same thing. So you may have, you know, if you really want transparency, lay all the cards out on the table at the same time for the same group of people, and instead of piecemealing it, because that does look odd. And frankly, I think I speak for the American people when I say we're sick of oddities.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. Let's just get it out there. But here's the thing. Include the Democrats, fine, but the FBI and the DOJ leadership, they need to finally level with the Congress and with the public, because they fought tooth and nail against all these disclosures. And remember, when Nunes started to pursue this informant angle, they were saying, oh, it'll kill national security. We can't do this. We can't do that. Yet who was the one that leaked it to the New York Times and the Washington Post? It wasn't the House Intelligence Committee. It were people in those agencies, because the House Intel, they didn't even have access to that information.
I will have a problem with Devin Nunes for a long time, because he knew about these abuses before he pushed for more robust spying. And those spy tools, which have obviously created and exacerbated the problems that we're seeing right now. And I hope you and your colleagues take it upon yourselves to make sure that power is now, from this point on, kept in check, so this doesn't happen to any more presidential candidates. I don't care what party they're from.
Well, the way to do that, Kennedy, at least the first step, is to hold people accountable who abused their positions and violated the law. That's why I and a number of my colleagues have called for the appointment of a special counsel to deal with the FISA abuse, to deal with the way the Hillary case was disposed of, and to deal with any improprieties involving launching investigation on Trump. So that, if no one's held accountable, then you can tweak the law here, you can tweak the law there, but you're going to continue to see abuses.
And I want to hold people accountable who give people like that money and power. And those are people in your position. You're not governor yet. You're still a congressman, and you still have a great responsibility to honor and uphold the Constitution. And I believe that you and your fellow stewards have, in that regard, let us down. And I hope we remedy this in the future so we're done with these political arguments. I do want to thank you for your time. You're always kind to come on board.
Thanks, Kennedy. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.